All right. The room is filling up, so I think I'm gonna start kicking it off. It's 1 p.m. Eastern time now. So this is the orthodontic learning series from People in Practice, which is brought to you by Dental Monitoring, which is your secret weapon for recruiting and retaining top talent. That also happens to be the topic of this conversation today. So I just want to let everybody know before I introduce everybody, after the webinar or after the conversation, there will be a Q&A session. So your questions that you pose as attendees in the Q&A form, we will address them at the end. We'll have about 15 minutes for the doctors to address any questions you have and answer any questions you have about this topic or related to dental monitoring. So if you have them, during the webinar, you think of them, pop them in the Q&A. We will queue them up and we will get them to the doctors after their conversation. And also, this webinar is being recorded right now. And if you miss anything during the recording or during the webinar, we will be sending out a copy to everybody who registered for the webinar a few days after it's over. So don't worry, you will be able to get a chance to review it. So right now, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Leon Klempner from People in Practice to do the intros and start us off.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I hope to make it worthwhile for you. My name is Leon Klempner, and I will be your host today. And welcome to another live People in Practice Orthodontic Learning Series webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I am a retired orthodontist. I practiced for about 40 years in the New York area. I'm currently teaching pedo and ortho residents part-time at Mount Sinai in New York, and Harvard and Boston Children's. I co-founded People in Practice Marketing with my oldest daughter, Amy Epstein, in 2011. And we started it because we wanted to bring to orthodontics a marketing company that was based on our core values of transparency and professionalism. We also have two podcasts that you might be interested in listening to, The Golden Age of Orthodontics and Practice Talk. And as always, the goal of this learning series is to explore the topics that are important to orthodontists. Today's webinar is part of the remote monitoring track sponsored by your secret weapon, Dental Monitoring. And spoiler alert, we do have a special offer at the end of the webinar. So today I'm happy to have one of our colleagues, Dr. Mike Ragan, here to speak with us today about how he is leveraging dental monitoring to not only address the technical aspects of it, but to address a pain point that I think most of us are experiencing, at least in my conversations with ortho. Almost everybody is dealing with some sort of staffing issues. A little bit about Mike. He practices in Dallas. He went to dental school at Baylor. He did his ortho training at Nova Southeastern in Florida. And on a personal side, he married his high school sweetheart, as I did. So Mike, thank you for taking the time and sharing your experiences with us.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this very much.
Great, great. So let's kick it off. Let's get right down to it. Most of us are familiar with dental monitoring as a tool to utilize in the office for a variety of different technical areas, but very few of us really were aware that it had implications with regard to either recruiting or retaining staff. So if you could just broadly maybe talk a little bit about how you utilize that in that arena.
Yeah, so I kind of start out just like you were talking about with so many people having staffing issues, and I think the staffing issues went up right after after COVID, right? And so I was in the same boat. I had let go of a staff member because of an issue, and had another staff member that was moving, who had been my office manager, and so I was in that tumbler of trying to find staff, and the people at Dental Monitoring had tried to convince me to come to the summit, and I didn't want to go because I'm like, dental monitoring is not going to help me with this. I need more staff. I need 2 more staff members, maybe even a third, just to work my practice. And they said, just come and listen and take part. And so it really did solve my issues. And when it comes down to recruiting and retaining, it really comes down to this. We all end up, and especially for me in a big city, whether you're in a small town or a medium-sized town, it's all how do you get people to come in and talk to you that have, good background, a good experience, that sort of thing. I think we all end up doing that the same way. What I've found is once they come in to the office and we show them the technology, and the other thing we show them is our schedule, how our schedule went from 60 patients today to 35 to 40 patients a day. They are like, wow, that's an amazing thing that I have never heard of, or I had heard of it, but I didn't realize what it really did for the practice. So it's really helped us in being at the top. When many of these people are interviewing at 2 or 3 places, it puts us at the top of their interview scale, and they call us back usually pretty quickly to say, hey, I really like the technology stuff you got going in your practice, and I'd like to, talk about that opportunity. So that's how it really got started.
Okay, so when I was in practice, we had different categories of employees that we would hire. So we'd have front desk staff that would basically answer the phone. We'd have, the clinical assistants that would work with me, in the treatment bays, and we would have somebody in the lab that would be ordering and doing things like that, and maybe another billing person. So those were traditionally the roles that orthodontists would hire for. But I'm well familiar with dental monitoring, and I know that there is a different category of employee that they refer to as a dental monitoring coordinator or a DMC, and I've heard a lot of different names and initials that go with it. But if you could take just a minute and explain what that is and how that's different than some of the traditional roles, and maybe why it would appeal to new employees that are looking.
Yeah, so and that's when I took that journey and figured out I really did need 2 or 3 more employees. What I ended up doing is hiring 1 chairside assistant and 1 DMC. And my DMC is actually not even full-time. She's part-time and she's remote. So what a DMC is they're like the intermediary between the patient and the treatment and the doctor. And so their role is that they have the dental monitoring platform up in front of them. And we've set different parameters on what we want to see the patient for, at what interval we want to see the patient for. And their role is to look at the data that's provided to them by the AI that dental monitoring provides, and by the intervals that we've set for check marks for things to be seen. For example, if we have an expander, we have that looked at every 2 weeks by my dental monitoring coordinator. AI looks at it every week. And if things are going well, she doesn't do much communication with me. If everything seems to be off or not turning or not moving, then she sends messages to me to get involved. So she is the stopgap, and she's taking that off of my plate so that I don't have to look at them every week in the dental monitoring platform, or I don't have to see them every month in the office to do it, because she's performing what we call weekly house calls. And so the DMC is responsible for keeping up with that and using that to be a better communicator with me and with the patient.
So you brought up a couple of interesting points, because it seems like this particular role has a little bit of a different set of skills that are needed. And so I'm just curious, when you fulfill this position, do you typically look for somebody in your office that wants to move into that role, or do you hire from the outside? Is there an advantage, a disadvantage of either one of those?
Yeah, so I think there's different pain points in the early stage with both or either of them. And I've heard it done both ways where people have taken somebody internally and made them into the DMC. And in my situation, I took somebody who had zero dental knowledge and trained her from the get-go. And I've even heard of people taking some of these recent graduates from assisting programs who have the basic dental knowledge and then plugging them in. And I think they all have some pluses and minuses. And I think to me, the great thing about hiring somebody with no experience is that I could train them in exactly what my eye looks for every time I'm looking at a case. So when your assistant sits down, they have so many responsibilities and O-rings and wires and all of that, right? That they're not thinking every time about what the canine should look like in a class one. They're not looking at what a molar should look like in a class one because they're thinking about so many other things. So by taking somebody who has either zero knowledge or at least a little knowledge of dentition or training them in it, then you get a much better overall outcome in for me. And she's communicating with me in the things that I really want her to communicate on. She was also the person I hired, had a background in customer service. And she had actually worked with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and in that role, in a side role with them. So she was a people person. And so that made it really easy for her communication between not just me and her, but the communication with the patients in a manner that she would show the picture and state it in a, hey, take a look at this, this would be better if you worked on that, versus a staff member who is so much more, okay, we need hygiene like this, and you train them slightly differently. So my thing is, I think that's probably an overall a better role from outside of the dental assisting community. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, and I love that type of thinking. It's like out of the box thinking because, when we would, I'll speak for myself. When I was hiring, I would always look for somebody with experience, somebody that's been in an orthodontic office. That's very limiting in terms of who you're going to attract. And I think that's part of the difficulty that we're having is we're all trying to fish in this small pond, and there aren't that many out there that have that skill set. Now, for somebody in the clinic, you need that, but here you really don't. So, the fact that you're hiring somebody that has skills, other social skills and communication skills, it seems like that would be ideal. But one thing that you did mention I want to come back to, and that is one of the pain points that I hear from orthodontists about why they're losing staff has to do with work-life balance. Whatever that means to you or them, that's the term that I hear. And you mentioned remote. At People in Practice, we work, we have our team members from all over the country, and we're able to attract them because they could work remotely and they don't have to be in the New York area. So, that seems like a big plus, but how do you do that? Like, can you just talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of not physically having somebody there yet doing the job?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think it's the not having someone there, the DMC coordinator, but it's also the work-life balance of your existing staff and what DM has done for that as well. So for the remote part of it, yes, it's allowed me with a lady who had quit working so she could be a mom, and now her kids are in school and they're still in school. So she has to take them and pick them up. So it's given her the flexibility in having something that she really likes and enjoys, but on her own schedule. So that from a part-time perspective and remote has been awesome. Now, the one thing you have to do with people in the practice is let them know that in my case, Miko is an actual person because they think she's AI because she's not in the office that we see her all the time. But that's kind of a joke and funny. When she's in the office, we introduce them to the people and say, "Hey, this is Miko." You know that she's actually here. But it's also a help during the normal workday with our existing staff, because say somebody does need to go have a doctor's appointment, or their kid has a school outing or gathering. DM has offered us to lessen that day-to-day schedule, because we're not seeing these 15-minute recurring visits that we don't really need to see. So it's freed up some time in the middle of the day that that staff member can make that call to the school that they need to about their kid, or it can go to an appointment if they need to. Or from our perspective too, we do a lot of our own marketing internally. It's allowed the staff to go and, you know, one or two staff members leave in the middle of the day to go ahead and do some of that marketing, that one-on-one marketing we do with the other general dentist offices. So it's a balance from a work side, because it's a much more, to me, a much more laid back day. But for their home life, and we're very big family oriented type of practice, where if you have something going with your kids, we want you to try and go. And even if it means a slight burden on the rest of the staff, we want you to do it. So at the beginning, they were all hesitant about starting this. And now everybody says to the person that if there's anything they wouldn't want to give up besides our ICAT, it would be dental monitoring.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the revenue side of it, right? So you mentioned about seeing less patients and freeing up some more time. You also mentioned about maybe working with less staff in the long run. Tell me a little bit about number one, like how long does it take to spin up a DMC? How long does it take, you know, what's the learning curve, for example? And give us an idea of how that can affect your revenue or your bottom line.
Yeah, so you know, we in the orthodontic profession, and I'm sure you were doing it during your career too. We talk about, you know, the cost per visit, right? And how much it costs to turn over a chair when someone comes into the office, and you're turning over the chair too many times for things that you don't really need to be doing, that just waste time that you could be either using to market or build, you know, the practice with more patients. So that part of it has really decreased, because a person that I used to see from a case, say an expander or a motion appliance or the combo, I'm seeing 3 to 6 times less than I would have in the past. So my cost per visit to my income has gone up. And then also your supplies have gone down, because you're not ordering as much to clean each unit, clean each chair. You got to turn all that over every time someone comes in. So from the bottom line of the office itself, just from a day-to-day operations perspective, that's come down with the ability to grow more and bring in more revenue. As it comes to the staff side of things, to have somebody that's part-time when I don't really truly need somebody full-time also helps the bottom line. And it helps these individuals because they can have their own time frame but still make the money that they need to. And so when you add all of that up, it is a decrease in overhead and an increase in revenue. Yeah, no, there's the cost of doing the dental monitoring platform, right, per patient. And the thing for that, and sometimes we talk too much about, you know, money savings, and we should talk sometimes about time savings. And there's so many times now when a parent doesn't want to come in because the competitive nature of education right now. They're all worried about their kids getting into college and not wanting to miss school. That's a time savings for not having to come in as often. We also talk about the time savings for parents. You know, a lot of parents are double working families, right? And in doing so, that's a burden on them to get out of their office to come and bring the kid. So if we can lessen that burden in time savings, then we're actually helping our practice grow, and we're helping parents understand that they don't have to come in as often, but we can keep a better eye on their patient with these, so-called weekly house calls. And one of the things it saves from a monetary perspective for the patient and parent too is that we don't have some of these cavities and decalcifications that we had before, because we are seeing them before they become a big problem. We can head it off before it's an issue. Also, when they come in for a visit, from a cost savings, their visits are more purposeful. So not only do we see that there's a loose bracket in one of the scans, but we realize that the wire is getting close to needing to be changed. So we combine that visit versus it's an emergency visit that all we're doing is fixing a bracket, and we haven't booked off enough time to do the full visit. Now we just make it a one visit thing as opposed to two separate ones. So again, time savings there as well.
So, yeah, we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to switch the topic a little bit here and cover another area that I know I spent a lot of time and money on, and I know orthodontists that I speak to do the same, which has to do with creating a positive practice culture. I used to tell my team, in the morning huddle that, look, we're certainly here because people want a beautiful smile and we're going to deliver that, but we're also here to have fun. And successful practices have fun, and people like coming to places where people are happy and having fun. And I know I've lost some people, really good employees that wouldn't put up with a culture or employees in the office that were had a lot of negativity. So tell me a little bit about your practice and whether dental monitoring has any effect on the culture of your practice. Does it allow you to have more fun?
Yeah, so I think in general, if you decrease the stress on the overall staff, it's going to have that lightening of the mood, the increase of the mood inside the practice. And so when I talked to the staff about, integrating this, it was the wailing and gnashing of teeth that we saw with, when you bring a new appliance into the practice, right? It's like, oh God, here we go again, right? And what we saw from month one, which was in a March, to month four in the middle of the summer, and we saw that schedule open because we weren't having to just rush around so much all the time. Their stress level came way down, and it definitely became a much more work friendly environment, because when all you're doing all day long is repairing stuff and parents are angry about it and they can't get in at the time they want to, now we can work them in at different times because we've freed the schedule up. So from that, it decreased that stress level, which just gave you the opportunity to do more of that. And so we've started doing some things I didn't think we did had time to, but now we do. We've started doing some volunteer things. So we go outside of the office and go to the food bank and stuff bags for the food bank. And I thought that this was going to be, I had to pull them to do it. And it's been a great activity that we've freed up some time to do that we hadn't done in the past. The other thing it did is it freed up one entire day each month that we can have a staff time that we try and do celebrations and then do some of our bigger external marketing. And external, everybody thinks about going and doing, muffin runs. No, we are doing social media stuff. And so it's kind of like a media day once a month. We just did part of it for the morning yesterday, where I went up to everybody that didn't know I was going to do it, and I filmed them giving us their name and what they do and their favorite food and all that stuff. And so it's made it so we freed up that time to make it a much more, hey, everybody's involved. We have fun together. We make it enjoyable. We have two assistants. I call the singing assistants because every time a song comes on that they like, they sing along with it, which just lightens the mood. And I think DM played a big role in that because it decreased that schedule, like I said, from that 60 to 35 to 40. That's a big decrease in it. And I'm one of my big tenets in my practice is running on time. And we were struggling to run on time. And so when you have much more freedom in the schedule, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah, and if you haven't checked out Mike's Instagram, You know, at People in Practice, we do our research. And so this morning, my partner Amy sent over a video of Mike where he's doing an interesting little dance there, very cute and well done. But tell me, you know, I've been told that there was something about a cricket machine or some use of that. Now, I have no idea what that is. So I have to ask you about it. So what is that, and how does that relate to your team?
Yeah, so that's funny because that's like their baby. They love this thing. I mean, it travels from office to office with us. So picture a printer that doesn't put stuff on the paper, it cuts holes in the paper. So what it is, it's a machine that you can cut out vinyl, you cut out different materials, and it can be adhered to a t-shirt, to a hat, to we moved into a new office and we're waiting for our new signs to come out. And so we've adhered it to the standard outside the door to let them know that it's us, because we don't have the standard outside the door. So it cuts out this vinyl and allows you to then put it onto different media. So the girls love to do stuff. I have these isms, they call them isms. And one is don't just do. And what I mean by that is these ladies and gentlemen that work for us, this is their profession, whether they understand it or not. And they're going to do it for the rest of their lives. And what we want them to do is not just sit and do and change O-rings. I want them to think. I want them to get in with the patients and the parents and talk to them. I want them to think, is this bite right? Should we do something else? So they made this isms t-shirt for me to wear around that says check mark, don't just do. I had a bunch of mine on it. So it's a way to make a fun staff. They come up with all these ideas. And one of the things we love to do in the state of Texas is go to the State Fair of Texas. It's huge in Dallas. So they're making t-shirts for us to walk around the State Fair of Texas together. And they, of course, like to dress me up in pink and things that they heat and it puffs up. And so they use this cricket, and almost all the moms out there know what I'm talking about, to dress things up and make it fun.
So, yeah, I'm going to put my marketing hat on just for a second and say that, you know, these are the things that grow practices. It may sound like fluff, but, you know, certainly it has to be in combination with high quality orthodontics. But the high quality orthodontics without this element is now, those practices are having a harder time. And not everybody has Mike's personality, but you don't need Mike's personality. But you have people in your office that might have a little spunk or willing to get on camera. So, and certainly reach out to People in Practice. We help practices do this all the time. Little plug for us. But you mentioned something, Mike, earlier that resonated with me because I am an early adopter. I always have been. And I would come back like supercharged and excited to share with my team something that I saw, something that I read, a meeting I came back from, and I wanted to implement some changes, you know, to make things better. And what I would get is, yeah, that sounds great, but you know, on the side it would be, you know, by Monday he'll forget about it. You know, it'll pass. You know, there's reluctance to change typically. Not everybody, not in all practices, but in many. How do you overcome that? How do you address the concerns that we already have so much to do, we're already so busy, we can't do something new? You know, I don't have to tell you that that type of input certainly is difficult to deal with. How did you deal with it?
Yeah, and I think many times, we all have the drawer that has the magnets and everything else in it, right? And the problem sometimes is dabbling. And when you dabble, it never works out that way. And so my philosophy has become whatever I've brought into the practice, we're going to go all in or we're not going to do it. And I think that's the key to especially dental monitoring. But as you probably know, and you've seen, I do a lot of talking about bite correction with the motion appliance. And I've done a bunch of lecturing on using mouth guards in your practice. And so what I think is that sometimes you jabble, you put like 5 little motion appliances on, or you say, okay, I'm only going to do dental monitoring on the kids who are off at college a long distance. And that's the wrong way to go about it, because you never get that full buy-in that you have to have. So I came in and I told them, I said, listen, we're going all in. We set a parameter at the patients, like anybody that was from Pano, Repo, or before, everybody's getting it. I know it's going to cost us some time in the beginning, but you got to trust me. Here's some videos to watch. I videoed a couple of the doctors at the summit, and I said, I want everybody to watch this at lunch. I'm going to pay for your lunch. I'm going to buy lunch, and we'll look at it, and it'll show you what it can be. And so I think the key for us definitely was we went all in from the moment I stepped in the office that day. Once we got the scan boxes in the office, and we trained a day and went straight at it. I think that's the key. And you're still going to have it. You're going to have those ones that push back. And I had a previous office manager that if I had done this in her watch, she would have gone ballistic. And so you're going to have to, find those people that are going to be that stopgap, and get them on your side and let them be the cheerleader with you. But all in, I think, is the key.
Yeah, yeah. I can certainly see that, particularly with something like as comprehensive as dental monitoring. Another thing that I used to do that was helpful is I try to find what's the benefit to the staff. I mean, I clearly always wanted a benefit for the patient. That was my criteria for incorporating any kind of new technology or purchasing equipment. It had to have a benefit to the patient. But sometimes finding things that are beneficial to the team helps them in terms of moving forward. And I know that there are different communication tools that dental monitoring has to offer that helps communicate between the front and the back. I've heard stories about how emergencies can be, which often disrupts an orthodontic practice, can be managed. Could you talk a little bit about that part of it, how it does benefit communication between team members?
Yeah, I'll start with the DM coordinator, and people don't think about it from this side. And it's, to me, it's one of the best training tools for your DM coordinator and your new staff member, because what it happened for us is there's a notes section. So when I have Miko, my DMC, when she was early on, I would have her type out a little thing about what she saw each time. Okay, I see that the bite's getting better. It looks like that there's some plaque here. And I would go in and say, yeah, that's right. Or no, take a look at this. And even to yesterday, she's been doing this for over a year for me now. She came to me and didn't understand how a class 3 to overcorrect needs to become a class 2. So we were able to pull up the screen and go over that and communicate specifically, okay, here's what it should be, here's what it is. And there's actually tools built into it from a communication with the patient to show, okay, you draw a line of where it is and you draw a line of where it should be, so they know that it's not quite there yet. So it's been great from that side. The other part of it is the communication between the DMC and the scheduling group, the communication between the DMC and the clinical group is easily done in a combination of DM and your practice management software. And so my DMC has access to the practice management software, and she'll go in and write a note that says, Dr. Ragan says that when we put that bracket back on that's loose, we need to also put a compensating bend in the lower left 2 mesial buccal. So what happens then is, before I even get to the chair, the staff member has already arch marked it for those specific teeth. They either point it out to me or write it down. And so then I'm ready. As soon as I get there, it takes me half the time that it used to sit down and look at the case. And then when it comes to, we don't schedule our patients once they have their bonding. we don't schedule them until the arch wire is passive. So when the arch wire becomes passive, then the DMC communicates via chat to the front desk, and the front desk knows to schedule them for the next visit. So it's got all these little components built into it. And some of the communication tools are not quite there yet directly. But DM has been listening and knows that there's got to be some other components to it that'll help us internally communicate between individual staff members. And it's definitely getting better. But the communication to the patient is unbelievable, unparalleled.
Yeah, so I mean, I could see, how some of these things can definitely appeal to team members in terms of incorporating this new technology. But on the flip side, and I know we're running low on time, and I want to leave enough for questions, but on the flip side of it, if I'm a dental assistant sitting in the team meeting, and you're talking about incorporating this new technology in terms of less patients and maybe less staff members, I'm getting a little bit nervous that, my job may be in jeopardy. Could you talk a little bit about how you would approach that in terms of a discussion about how you can reinvest in the team, maybe whether it be with salaries or benefits or even some security? I mean, that must come up in the mind of team members when they hear about becoming more efficient, more streamlined, and trimming the sails, so to speak. Tell me a little bit about how you address that.
Yeah, so I think that the good team members understand that valuable staff is more important than number of staff. And so if you talk about quality versus quantity with them and say, okay, you guys are quality. I don't want to keep adding people just to fill a gap, right? So they understand that. The other thing is that we were able to incorporate some other technologies and then I've reallocated what they used to do. So now we have our clinical coordinator is also our digital coordinator. So what she does is sets up all the digital lab components in the 3D printing. So she was able to be allocated in a little bit different role and didn't have to worry about that. So I think that you can definitely talk to them more about, it's not about we're going down the number of people. We want to keep our same people because everybody's doing great. And I did see that like the cattiness and infighting that was happening sometimes in different groups went down because they had more time to do the stuff that they're always rushing to get done. Oh, I didn't get that done. I didn't check tomorrow's schedule to make sure we have all the appliances. Well, they have time in the day to do that. So I don't think it's been that. I don't think that they think as much about that because we did say, okay, this is about making it better, easier on us during the day. And so that we can do some of those things that we weren't doing before, or you can get the things that you weren't getting done and having to stay late or work through lunch or coming on Friday mornings to do. Now we don't have to do that because we've made it a much more efficient workday with the same number of staff.
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard some orthodontists talk about, not letting people go, but not necessarily replacing people that either retire or leave, as one of the strategies that they use. But Mike, I so much appreciate your insights and everything that you shared. I wish we had a lot more time, but we're going to open it up to some questions. But for the listeners out there, working in an orthodontic office, oftentimes, if you put on the lens of one of your assistants or somebody in the staff, oftentimes it could feel like a dead-end job where there's no opportunity to grow. This seems like a pathway for team members to grow and to step up and to learn new skills and to become more valuable and one of the things I know that, it applies to us at People in Practice is, our team members, they want to make a difference. They feel like they want to make a difference. And these are ways that appeal to prospective applicants when they're applying for a job in your office. So Having said that, thank you again, Mike. I'm going to turn it back over to Lon for some Q&A.
All right, great. Thank you. So I have the first question is specifically about the DMC role. And from hiring, I guess, are there any specific skills you look for when hiring a DMC, specifically for that role? Is there some sort of skill set? Is there something you're looking for in the application or the resume that you want to see for a DMC role?
I think the biggest thing to me is your people person, right? Somebody who can uh, uh, communicate with not only patients externally, but also staff internally in a positive manner, right? And we've all had it, that person on the staff that likes a certain person and talks to them one way, and they turn around and like jumps down the throat of the other one, right? So they're not real people person. And I think that's the first thing, is just having a good personality. And I know they're not talking on the phone to patients and parents, but sometimes, because communicating in something like a chat or a text can be, lack the emotions that many times get misconstrued, that you need somebody who kind of understands that. And I think a real people person will do more descriptive texting or chatting than the average person. And then I think the other thing is a person who really wants to learn, because I think that DM offers such a broad spectrum of learning. To what you said right before we ended there, and my whole thing of not just do. I mean, when we pull something or see something unusual, they already have the DM platform up right in front of the patient with their scan. And many times I'll say, "What do you see?" And so it starts to engage them and get them into, being part of the whole process. And somebody who's got that real people skill, really wants to help and be positive, will be looking for that from the very beginning. And that's what we've gotten with Miko, is that though she had no dental knowledge whatsoever, she had that thirst for learning and really wanting to help people. So I think that's the biggest component to it.
Okay, great, great. Just a reminder, if anybody has additional questions, we've got some queued up here, but if anybody has additional questions, you can pop them in the Q&A panel there. So I guess this is a second part of that question about a DMC role specifically. And it says, do you save money on a DMC coordinator, a dental monitor coordinator role versus other types of staff? Is it a different pay grade or same pay grade? How do you determine that when you're bringing in someone just to be a DMC in your office?
Well, we definitely started out lower than the experienced staff member, but I think it's somebody that over time is going to be just as valuable as a chairside assistant. So we're probably looking at, early on, lower on the pay scale in your office, but as they develop, they have the potential to grow as fast, if not faster, than some of your chair sides or people who've been with you for a while, because they are the intermediary between you and the patient. And so I think that's something that will take some time to figure out. I don't think that it's been around long enough, that role, to know if there is a definitive pay scale that goes along with it. But I try and keep everybody in the same type of pay scale based off of number of years, performance, all of that stuff. And even though what I did do, even though she's part-time, I still have allowed her to have benefits, that we didn't always offer to our part-time staff. And we've been, as the practices post-COVID have been down a little bit, hitting those bonus numbers has been tough. So we've even said that if we do, because she's an integral part of making sure that everybody gets through the process as quickly as possible, and sometimes even in the observation and monitoring stage, that she'll be part of the bonus system as well. So that's helpful in keeping and retaining them from a employee pay scale.
Good. Okay. Okay, here's another one. Excuse me, specifically for that DMC role. I understand that there's a DMC specific role, but are other staff members trained in the same way on DM to do a little of what the coordinator does? And and I guess this is from a boss perspective, I guess. And is that a threat to the person in that role at all? Is there any cross training, and or do you keep it exclusive in silos, those roles when it comes to a dental monitoring coordinator?
No, I don't keep them separate. Everybody needs to know how to use the entire platform, and things that aren't really seen until you really get into doing DM at the depths is that the DMC role is reliant on the assistants doing their part at the chair side. And so they both need to know all the ins and outs and uses of the platform. And what I mean by that is, a patient comes in for an arch change. And so the chairside assistant has to go in and note that the arch wire was changed and set the interval that they need to wait to be seen. And so if that's not done, then the DMC doesn't know if it's time for, has the arch wire really been passive, or was it just changed and now it's changed the activity? So they have to work together simultaneously. And in doing so, they both need to know the role. And your DMC is going to be out of town or on vacation or whatever. So we want everybody to have the ability that when they're gone, that we say we have everybody checking the platform during the day. You'll go up to somebody and say, oh, you don't have anything right now, go check it because Miko's out of town. So it helps them too to understand how important it is that they do their role so that the DMC can do her role better, more efficiently. And so the patients aren't left behind without communication.
Okay, great. So here's a different type question, I guess. When you're recruiting, and you're talking a lot about the flexible work arrangements, I guess. When you're recruiting or when you're reaching out, how important do your candidates feel that flexible work arrangement is to the job when you're hiring? Is that something that you find that people respond to, or is that something that's, not as important to your candidates when recruiting good talent?
So it kind of goes back to a little bit of what Leon said when he was talking about his practice and trying to, we're just recycling the same people over and over, right? And so what I've seen as a pattern more recently is that many of these people went to work in the clinic setting, meaning like the big corporate boxes, not like a DSO or an OSO, but more of the, I don't want to name any specific groups, but basically they were just the, sheer numbers. You got to see a ton of people. So what we've seen is that those people then come in, and when you tell them that they're not going to be working 6 days a week, they're not going to be traveling between 10 different offices that are 20 miles apart. That's one of the big helps for those individual people. But then when you start showing them the DM platform and why and it's always been my tenet, but it was harder to do before dental monitoring, is that families first. And so when you do have that kids thing at school, like the performance in the middle of the day, or we have some ladies that have been pregnant. We've got one right now, and she needs to go see the OB on a weekly basis because of some issues. We know that there's that flexibility there, and we talk about that when we are in our recruiting process. And we talk about the fact that we don't bring in temps. We're here to help each other and keep each other's backs. And I think that that's the most important thing. DM has helped us with that because it's freed up that time that we can allow that to happen. But I think that's really based off of your culture and being really dedicated to your culture.
Good. Okay. And I think you might have addressed this earlier, but I think there's a question that's just come up. Many practices worry about staff resistance to new tech, and I think you addressed part of this. But how, and training, like you mentioned, is one of them. But how else do you address those concerns with your team when you're introducing something as almost like, a big change like dental monitoring? How do you address that, like, to the staff if there's some resistance to it?
Yeah, well, the first thing is DM has a great setup for that. So what happens with DM is they have an entire onboarding process, and part of that is you going through your existing procedures and protocols, and your staff is the ones that help you do that. They help with DM, and then you have specifically designed people that take your protocols and enter it in the computer. And then we have Holly. Holly is our lady. She's awesome. She's our trainer. So she then comes on site and helps them to understand, okay, this is why we did this. You know how you used to do your archwire changes, it was 6 or 8 weeks. Well, guess what? Your interval for checking in DM is still 6 to 8 weeks. You just don't have to see them until that hits there. So they are very good about training it. They have lots of people to help you with that training. And in doing so, then the staff gets a chance to ask questions. What if, what if? And they can answer it versus me being the one that's saying, oh, we're just going to do this. You just need to buck up and be a part of the team. No, they're there to hold your hand throughout that integration process. But I think it's really the key, like I said earlier, is all in. If you piecemeal it, if you just take 1 or 2 patients or 10 patients and say, we're going to test this, then you really never get a feeling as to how the entire flow will go. And it just seems like a burden, and it's really not. You have to have at least a good portion of your practice in to make it happen. And I think that's with anything. I think DM is no different from that. It's just that DM has the ability to make it a much more open, easier day than some of the others do. Because you put on a motion appliance, they still have to put that motion on the same way every time. It can't decrease your time during the day. It can decrease your stress because you're not repairing a herpes or something like that. But yeah, so it is the way you got to sell it and let DM help you do it.
Perfect. Great. That is the last question we have. So, and we're right on time, just about it's at a time. So, I wanted to thank you both for your time here, and wanted to also let everybody know that we do have a special partnership deal with Dental Monitoring. And if you go to pplpractice.com and go to our partner page, you can scroll down and click on Dental Monitoring to get that. And we will also be sending that link in the follow-up email for the video that we'll send out of this recording. So you don't have to write it down. You will get a link to it. And so I think that's it. We're at the end of our time here.
One more thing, Mike, if any of our listeners have a question or a concern, how would they reach out to you? What's the best way that they could ask you a question or engage with you? Mike?
Mhm.
Mike
He
doesn't want to give us
answer the
that
question.
information.
Yeah. Looks like he got frozen.
Anyway, anybody could email me at leon@pplpractice with any questions. I'll make sure Mike gets that and gets back to you. Mike, are you there? We lost you for a minute.
Here, yeah, it's back now. Something happened. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can email me at Dr. Ragan, DrRagan at RaganOrtho.com.
Great.
perfect. Well,
Okay.
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lon. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for spending some time with us. Again, any questions, you can reach out to me at leon@pplpractice.com. And I hope everybody has a great day. Bye-bye.